Hi everybody. Alright, for class today, we are still working on bare basics. Again, primarily, the reason why I'm doing these super bare basic classes now is because I, one, have discovered I have not fully covered every aspect, and I know the live that I did where I was covering bare basics, it cut in and out so bad it was ridiculous. And two, because when my stepdaughter decided she wanted to become pagan, I was trying to teach her, and I realized that with some of the younger generations, you basically have to handhold them, be very specific. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them. So today we're working on the cauldron. Historically, in its most mundane form, the cauldron was basically a giant cooking pot that was used over an open fire. They were enormous, with, huge spots for fire pits underneath, typically in castles, things like that, but there were smaller versions that people in villages would use and things like that, or whatever. But it was basically a big cooking pot. That's all it was. Kind of like now how you have the cast iron pans and things like that. It was that. But back then, just a giant cooking pot. Representations of the cauldron in folklore include that of Caerdwyn, the Welsh crone with her cauldron of wisdom, and the Dagda, I might be pronouncing that wrong, the Irish god who king whose cauldron would never empty. Words are hard for me right now. I am sick. I've not been doing great the past few months, honestly. It's been a lot. So my apologies for mispronunciations and miswording. This, in addition to depictions in literature like The Three Witches in Macbeth by William Shakespeare, forever associated cauldrons with witches. In practice, cauldrons can be used with charcoal discs to burn offerings of herbs, petitions, and incense during spell casting and rituals. Cauldrons can also be used to mix herbs into potions, and much like what would stereotypically be seen, or in stories be seen. The bubble, toil and trouble and all that. I mean, it's never that extreme. It's never that dramatic by any means. Because the cauldron is I will be all right. Because the cauldron is both a vessel and used with practices involving open flames, I apologize. It can represent the element of fire and stand in for the chalice to represent water in Wiccan rituals, depending on how you're using that cauldron. You can't use it with fire and then say it represents water. It just does not work like that. My apologies. It's that chest cold that won't quit. A jumbo cast iron cauldron can weigh as much as 8 pounds. You can also find brass and aluminum. The most popular option is undoubtedly the cast iron cauldron. They are hardy, durable vessels that are heat safe and retain heat for a long time. Meaning they can be used with open flames as well as charcoal disc, which is why it is most commonly and traditionally used. When you pick a cauldron, you consider a few things. Mostly it comes down to personal preference. Personal preference. Words are hard. But there are a few factors to keep in mind when choosing the cauldron. How large do you want the cauldron to be? Will you be traveling with it? Using it indoors or outdoors? You have to keep in mind the different features as well. Handle. If you plan on traveling, walking around with it, while it's lit, if you have a charcoal disc or a fire inside, like if you're burning herbs, incense in it and trying to carry it room to room, you need a handle. And I speak from personal experience. With the handle, when you have the fire going, prop that handle up just a little bit. Don't let it touch the side of the cauldron. You will burn the fuck out of your hand. Pardon my language. You will burn your hand. It's not fun. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Anyways. Lids. A lidded cauldron is necessary if you want to keep smoke from escaping for ritual purposes, as well as keeping yourself, your pets, and your children from inhaling the smoke if necessary. And realistically, in this day and age, the most practical reason for the lid, especially with a cast iron cauldron, because I would not advise burning anything in a cauldron made of anything but cast iron, just because of the safety of it. If you are burning something, if you think it's getting out of control, quickest way to put it out is to put the lid on to extinguish the flame. It also contains the smoke until it cools down and you can get it outside and pull the lid off to let the smoke out. That is the biggest reason for a lid for a cauldron. If you're doing water stuff, you can use brass, you can use aluminum, you can use whatever, as long as it's not going on an open flame. As long as you're not applying heat to it, you can use brass or aluminum and it'll work fine. I prefer iron because I typically use it for fire. Legs. Many cauldrons come with 3 legs, aka the tripod. Boop. Those keep the cauldron from burning or damaging your altar. And again, if you're doing anything with fire, legs will save your life. Not your life, but not literally, but maybe literally. The legs will be the coolest part of the cauldron. You do not put, if you are doing fire with your cauldron, do not put it on anything plastic. If you are doing it inside, your best bet is put it on your stove, turn your vent on. It's your best bet. That is your safest bet. The vent over your stove will suck up the smoke, get that smoke out. But don't put it on anything that's sensitive to heat. Don't put it on tile. Don't put it on plastic. Like cheap wood tables, do not put it on. If you have one of those like thick, hardy, old school wood tables, it should be fine. If you are going to, say, put it on a table or whatever, put it on top of a cookie sheet first. It'll help absorb some of that heat and keep from scalding your surfaces. I still would not advise like cold tile floors or porcelain or whatever, marble. No. It'll get too hot, everything will crack. Same with glass. Don't put it on glass. Symbols and shapes. That's all aesthetic. or your personal connection to that symbol. Um, it's really a vibe thing, a deity thing, tradition. Um, Most of the time, at least not most of the time, most of the times that I've used a cauldron, is to burn. I do any spell work that consists of fire outside of candle magic into the cauldron. Also, if you have done any, I don't want to say malicious because that does not sound right, but if you'd written, any petitions, done any karma work, or anything that's even seems not so savory in any way, shape, or form, because to me, karma work is fine, but disposing of it is a pain in the butt. There's certain work that I do that, like candle work, that I make my own candle holders for because I want to dispose of them after, and that is typically some form of like a cord cutting or a karma work or something like that. One thing I will use the cauldron for is to burn all that shit off. Just put it in the cauldron with a tumbleweed or some wood. Put protective herbs on top, like some sage, some Palo Santo, lavender, rosemary. Burn it off. Just let it go. Better do that outdoors though, honestly. But it's all about what you want to use it for, honestly, and how you want to use it. I also, and I have a friend that does the same thing with her cauldron that I do. I love her to death. She's the one that taught me to do that, and that saved me a lot of headache when it comes to disposing of things. Because you burn the stuff off, and then what you burn, that you wrap in the silk, and you can go bury somewhere. The reason I say silk is an insulator. It insulates from the icky crap. But, and if you're using your cauldron for that purpose, I personally would advise doing like a monthly cleanse of the pot. I don't mean washing it. If you take soap to it, you will regret it. It will rust. It'll look like shit. No, nothing like that. You go outside with it. Get some wood, your tumbleweed, whatever. Get some wood, a little bit of sage, and or rosemary, and or Palo Santo, any mix of the three. Throw some lavender in if you want. And you just let that burn. And you just keep feeding fire into it and all that for upwards of an hour. And it burns all that icky shit out. All the leftover wax and whatever little particulates are left of, say, the clay or anything that just stuck to the sides. And you just keep feeding the fire and, turning the fire, and you'll have to dump it out a couple times and scrape it out a couple times and then go back to it and refill it and relight it and all that. But you do, like, I would say 3 cycles. Pot full of wood. You get the fire going. Burn it down. Just keep feeding it wood till it's about full. Just till it's like 2/3 of the way full. And then dump out all those ashes on concrete. Not in the grass, please, because they will still be hot. You dump it out where it is safe and you're not going to burn your yard up. Dump it out in a bucket of water if you want. I don't care. Just don't burn your house down. Don't burn your yard down, please. Dump it out in a bucket of water, on concrete, wherever. If you do it in concrete, don't do it in your driveway. I say this because there are oils and gas and stuff like that that seep into your driveway, into that concrete, and there could potentially be issues. But you dump all that out, preferably in a bucket of water, and then you rebuild your fire and you go again. You only really need the protection herbs for the first bit. The rest you can just keep building fire. And do that 3 times. And every time, scrape out, dump, scrape out some more if you can. Dump, you can just use a stick to scrape. It doesn't matter. And then rebuild, go from there, and you're good. And I feel like I just spent way too much time explaining that, more than I needed to. But that way, it's cleansed. You don't have to worry about it. When you go back in, after you let it sit outside and cool for a while, because it's going to be hot. Make sure you take oven mitts with you. After you let it cool and you bring it back in, just wipe it out with a paper towel. And you're good to go. It's also good to do after you do certain rituals. I had a healing ritual I had to do like every Sunday for a month. That consisted of melting wax into the bottom of the cauldron, putting the candle in the cauldron, putting an amethyst in, and then putting these herbs in, and stones in, and you burnt the candle a little bit each week until the next new moon. And when I did that, I underestimated how many herbs I had left. And yeah, I started a fire in the cauldron the last week. I texted my friend who had given me all the herb. Basically, she gave me the ritual that I had to do. And I told her, I was like, hey, everything's just lit on fire. What do I do? And she goes, good. It's like, what do you mean? She said, good. Put the rest of that icky stuff from earlier in the month in there and let that burn too. The house was filled with smoke. The fire alarm went off. Fire alarms went off. And I was ripping fire alarms out of the walls because I was not going to listen to it. And there was no stopping it. And it was too late to move said cauldron because it was big flames that were higher than the handle. So I wasn't risking it. Everything was contained. It was in my bathroom, in front of the sink. If it got too bad, I could have dumped water on it. So it wasn't, too bad. I still have scorch marks around my sink because of it. But past that, but I don't care too much about aesthetic. And after doing that, I think I had to burn like 1 or 2 more things off. And then finally me and my husband decided, okay, we actually got to clean this out. So that was when we got everything together and we just burnt it out. And we kept burning it out and kept burning it out. And I've got a little square concrete thing where there used to be a fire pit on. And we were dumping things out onto that because that was a fire. Where a fire pit was, it's safe to use. And I've used that spot as a fire pit ever since. So, yeah, to make a short story a long story, back to a short story, basically that was how we managed it. But yes, especially if you're using it for fire, burning stuff off, make sure you cleanse it once a month, once every 2 months, just depending on how much you're doing in that cauldron. Just every month or 2, burn it out. When I was doing it, I had the cauldron for it was close to a year, and I still hadn't burnt it out, and shit was going awry. Things were going sideways. It was bad, and I could not deal. And we realized one of the issues might have been the cauldron, which is why we burnt it out, cleaned it out, and after that, things started to settle a little bit. When it comes to ones that you would use for brewing potions, which I would advise, unless you're putting it on heat, aluminum, or, what was the other one I said? What was it, brass or copper? Either of those would probably be brass or aluminum. That's what it was. Either one of those would probably be much better with liquids, personally, unless you're putting it over open fire or something like that. If you want to apply heat to them without being too extreme, like treat it like a double boiler, I would advise using like an old school wax melter that you put the candle in and light the candle and the wax melts on top. Take that little dish out for the wax melt, put that aluminum or brass cauldron on top, and that'll work as a double boiler, and it's not too much heat. It's not enough heat that it's going to burn through because of how far the candle is from the cauldron itself, but it's enough heat where it will bubble, it will simmer, it will get hot. So that is something to keep in mind. It's just a thought, just an idea. I mean, we had to do that the other night. We were making a specific oil, and we needed to warm the oil while we put specific herbs in because we had to substitute for sunflower oil. Could not find sunflower oil anywhere for some reason. Any other time I can. And I think the one bottle we found was like $20, and it was way too expensive. So instead we put the jojoba oil that we also had to use, and we put the sunflower petals and seeds in there, and we had a couple other things we had to substitute for essential oils that we were missing. So we had to use like powdered sandalwood and powdered myrrh because we're broke. We couldn't afford the essential oils for it, and the essential oils were like almost $11 a bottle. And we had to adapt and incorporate that way. One of the oils we had never even heard of, amaranth oil or something like that, which was one where we had to substitute for sandalwood. But we put a little aluminum bowl, little metal bowl, on top of what was, I assume at one point, a wax melter. At that point, it was just a core. And lit a tea light candle underneath, and it kept things bubbling and going and all that, and warmed it up so everything could incorporate. So, I mean, if you're using it for that, that is a good idea. But you just have to be very careful one way or the other if you're doing oils in it. Remember, oil hot, oil burn. If it's something that consists of different kinds of water, still be careful because it's still going to scald you. It won't be as bad as it is with oil, but it's still going to hurt. But, alright, that will be all for class for today. I hope I didn't carry on too long and drag on too much. But thank you so much, everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye.